hopefuls. We are on the air with MBA Waves, your weekly vidcast talking all things business and education, streaming live every Tuesday on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We bring to you tons of tips to help you into a top ranked business school program and get you up and close in person with many of these business schools that we host on the show, where you can get all your questions answered. And if you like this week's episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Today on episode number 102, yes, you heard it right, 102, we crossed just 100 and I'm pretty excited. We're going to talk with Candy La Balle, founder La Balle Admissions, about gearing up for round one. A big welcome to you, Candy.
Hello. Hi, hello from Spain. Hola. How are you?
Hola. And yeah, doing pretty great. And a big welcome to my co-host, Eric Lucrezia of Candidate Coach as well. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing great. Bonjour, ça va bien, merci. Hi, everyone. Excited for today's episode. Round one is just around the corner.
Oh, it is close. It is 112 days or 16 weeks or 3.5 months away.
Candy, you remind me of new parents, right, who go counting their babies' ages in days and weeks and confusing the rest of us. But I know how passionate you are about MBA applications. So let's jump into the topic today. A majority of top MBA programs have their round one applications in September. So to get us started, how important is it applying in round one?
Oh, that is such a common question. I think a lot of people ask. So yes, the majority of deadlines are going to be the first week of September, the second week of September, or the last week of September, with a couple of schools in early October. So we don't have a lot of time for round one. If you can make it to round one, why not? I think it's always a good practice not to increase your odds. I think that's the mistake. People always say, oh, I have to apply in round one or I won't get in. That's not the way it works. Most programs have an internal system that they use in admissions where it's fine if you do round one or round two. You should have equal odds. There's usually not a problem with that. I think it affects more the applicant. If you apply in round one, by December where you're going. So December 2023, you would know where you're going to be 9 months from then. So you can plan everything. You can, get an apartment, make your flights, whatever, leave your job. And if you apply,
get a visa.
Get a visa, especially you need to get a visa. If you apply in round two, you still have the same odds to get in, but you find out your decision in March. So you have less time to do all that stuff. So definitely, I don't think it makes a difference for competition, but definitely for your own personal satisfaction.
Since you brought up rounds 1 and 2 and conspicuously left out round 3 and in some cases 4, 5, etc., do you have any follow-up feedback on that? Comments on that?
So most of the majority of business schools have 3 rounds. So round 1 in September, round 2 in January, and round 3 in March. And the general wisdom is round 3 is impossible. You never get in. But round 3 would not exist if there were not seats to fill, right? So what happens is a lot of business schools, they take in applicants in round 1, they take in some more in round 2. Meanwhile, the people they took it in round 1 are applying elsewhere. They drop the application. They don't decide not to go. There's always seats open in round 3, so it's possible to do it. However, it is true if you have a very, very typical profile, a male consultant, a banker, probably round 3 is not a good idea. It's usually better if you're unique in some sort of way, but there's always going to be seats open.
Now, we saw a really interesting year this past cycle, right? For various reasons, a lot of people attribute to the tech layoffs, perhaps other factors, why rounds 1 and 2 perhaps were a little bit slower than typical, and round 3 was really big this year. Anything to share about that? And could we anticipate a similar thing this year, or no way of knowing? Where are you?
Yeah, I don't make predictions on that kind of stuff. My expertise is helping people get accepted. So I can't decide on that. I think what we saw this year is a lot of schools added extraordinary deadlines. They added a new round 3, they added a round 4, they extended round 3, they dropped GMAT requirements. The reasons why, I don't know. That's not my expertise. What do you think?
I would say that, this is a great time for business schools. Business schools love misery. I'm kidding. Love misery on the job market, because many of them are going to come back to business school. Where else? But that said,
people tend to flock. I'll never forget the uptick in COVID, just the insanity, the number of applicants. So yeah, but anyway, back to round one. So what would you like to know about round one?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe you could talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of applying in the first round.
Okay. Well, as I said to you before, I think the advantage is that you know what you're doing with your life a lot sooner. I think that's the main thing. You can figure out your visa, your funding, everything. Honestly, I think that's really the only advantage, you know?
Okay.
And speaking of international applicants, I would say that you typically have only 2 rounds, or
Mm-hmm.
at the most three, depending on where it is. But what the round is called, depending on the program. But it
Mm-hmm.
typically is, ending by Jan 15th, or worst case Jan 31st. Because
Yeah.
anything later than that, it's going to be a nightmare getting everything ready,
Difficult.
going.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
especially, and as you rightly said, sorry, go
Right.
ahead.
I was
Yeah.
agreeing with you. International applicants definitely really are not good for round three. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and as you were rightly saying, for some of the overrepresented applicant pool, which we have many of,
Mm-hmm.
like the Indian IT male applicant and so on, you really want to get in first and be that representative from that pool. So I think it's also a question of the early bird uh, who comes gets a worm kind of a thing.
Exactly. I guess there's also I didn't think to mention scholarships. So usually round one, there's more scholarship money in the pot. Round two, there's still some. Round three, there's usually not a whole lot left. So
Yeah.
And how does it differ, in North America versus Europe versus Asia when we think of round one?
Maybe focus
you
on
mean,
North America and Europe, perhaps.
I don't know the question. Say it again.
How does round one differ in North America versus Europe, and of course versus Asia?
Yeah, I mean, so like we said before, usually US round one is in September, round two is in January, round three is in March. Many of the top European schools follow that. So ESA in Barcelona, London Business School, they follow that exact, format. So September, January, March. I don't think either one of them have a round four anymore, but I'm not sure. Other schools in Europe are different. So when you look at HEC Paris or you look at INSEAD, they have very different systems because they have different times you enter. So both of those programs, you can start in January or you can start in September. They're 10-month programs, so they tend to have a lot of different times that you can apply. I usually say with INSEAD, you can always apply. There's always a deadline.
Yeah.
With HEC having one deadline almost every single month of the year. And as you pointed out, with 2 intakes, that does change things. So
That changes a lot, yeah.
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 Canadian schools tend to follow. I was just going to say Canadian schools tend to follow a lot of the American schools, like say North American, but there are exceptions on both sides of the pond in terms of duration of program and intake. Ivy, for instance, famously starts in March, which is very different than most schools.
Yeah. Well, and then you have Columbia. Dun, dun, dun. So Columbia is so complex. Honestly, they have early decision, they have regular decision, they have J term. There's so much going on there. I think if you have Columbia on your list, it's one of your dream schools, you really need to spend some time figuring out their system because they have something called early decision, which opens up in May, June, and it runs through April. Okay, so if you apply an early decision, you're making a commitment. Columbia, I love you. You're my best school. I'll do anything to go. I'm going to apply an early decision. And if you get accepted, you pay a certain fee, a rather large fee to secure your spot, right? Because Columbia goes on rolling decision, it does make sense if you're in a very competitive applicant pool that you would apply as quick as possible. So if it opens up in May or June, you want to apply in June, early July, something like that. And then it doesn't continue through, it continues through January. Now, regular decision is their normal application, the normal period. There's no commitment. You don't have to sign a document or pay a large fee. But what a lot of people don't realize, it also opens up in June. So when the application opens, it's open completely. You can apply for early decision and submit your application in June. You can apply in regular decision and submit your application in June. And you're still going to take advantage of the rolling decisions. The only difference is they're not going to look at regular decision until they're finished looking at all the early decisions. So once they finish all those, they go back and they take the first regular decision in order it was that you applied. So I think that's a little trick that a lot of people don't realize. They think they have to wait till October for regular decision. You really don't.
Thank you for making that distinction. One of our colleagues who often asks questions on the show, Marlena, thank you for asking this. You've already kind of addressed scholarships, but I will say there's a couple of things going on with scholarships, and it really depends on the school, right? Everyone's kind of doing their thing. Now, there is the often schools have these early bird round scholarships. For example, where I used to work, if you applied in round one, it was a fixed number. It was like, that you're going to have, let's say, for just throwing out a number there, you're going to have 3,000 off the top of your total tuition price. If you apply in round two, it's 2,000. Round three is 1,000. So this kind of descending order to motivate you to apply earlier, right?
Yeah.
Schools are interested in dispersing their workload throughout the year, so it's not all at once. But then there is the idea of a total budget that is earmarked for scholarships, and once that runs out.
Yeah, once it runs out, it's gone. So that does kind of push you to want to apply earlier. But then we come up to the other question: are you ready? Like, you don't want to rush your application for round one if your application is not amazing. And usually that would start with your test score. Like, if you have a good enough test score for round one, you need to think, can I improve it? And if I can improve it 20 points, maybe it's worth waiting for round two. Same thing with your essays and your recommenders. If you're not able, if your recommenders are off, I don't know, in the mountains all summer long, and you can't get them, and you're trying to ask them to do the recommendation letter, at the end of August, is it going to be good? You have to kind of think, like, maybe I need to wait. So you also have to think about, when do I apply? When am I most ready?
Absolutely. There's a lot of mythology surrounding when is the best round to apply. And I think there are clear advantages to applying early, some of the things that we just mentioned. But again, it is the right round when you're fully ready. And that includes the factors that are out of your control, like the recommenders. So many things. And I think when you attend as many school sessions as we do, we always hear them say the same thing, that it doesn't matter round one or round two. Apply when you are most ready, when you have the strongest application. Another question just popped in from Marlene, if that's okay, Krithika. I figured it was a good time to ask this to the room. What do you think is an ideal timeline for taking the GMAT?
If I was speaking to my dream applicants and I'm going to tell them what to do, I'd say, take it as soon as you get out of university. It's got a 5-year deadline. Get it out of the way so that when you're ready to apply, you don't have to worry about it. Because as we all know, if round one is sneaking up and the GMAT or the GRE is not secured, things get stressful. It gets very tense. If you were going to start, you know that you want to apply this year. Hopefully you get the GMAT by January or February, so you have the whole, until September to do your school research, to update your resume, to get more leadership on your profile, to just get everything organized and done. So ideally, you'd have it out of the way pretty early. But that doesn't
college, right out of university, your brain is still in the mind of taking tests.
Exactly. Your brain is like popping, and the school just wants to see the highest score. They're not going to be like, oh, he took it 4 years ago, it's not valid. If it's a 760, it's valid.
It's about what you're capable of, right? And and one of my clients the other day was saying that I'm just like, I have rust on my brain. I don't think I can crack this. I'm gonna wait for the GMAT Focus Edition.
That's coming up soon. But yeah, I would say the majority of my clients that I'm working with right now for round one, I would say 70% have the test out of the way. So all we have to do in the next 3 months is focus on executing the applications. Another 30% don't. And so we're moving, tentatively. They don't want to deep dive into like, oh, let me write my full Stanford application when I still don't know if I'm going to get the test score, right? So we do other things. You work on the test score as you're talking to your recommenders, as you're updating your resume, as you're working on general essays, like a goals essay that you can apply to a lot of schools. And maybe you don't deep dive into the hardcore, I'm going to execute this application if you don't know the score yet, right? So that it gets a little tense.
So let me just ask, are there some key things that you would recommend that people should know specifically about applying in round one?
That there's a lot of work to be done. I think that surprises people even still, as much, you Google GMAT, MBA application advice, and there's just millions of hits, and still people don't realize how much is involved. So I do think you have to give yourself a big lead, 6 months, 8 months, a year, to sort of get all the little pieces together, and some of it's just basic stuff. you have to get your transcripts. You have to get them in English if they're not English. You need to take the English exam if that's required. But some of it's more complex. Like, okay, I'm going to apply in September. If it's January, I'm starting. I have 9 months to get a little bit more leadership, to have a little bit more impact at work. And that's not something you can do if you're starting, in July. There's just really not enough time. So the more lead time, I think the better.
Totally agree.
And I think I'll add one more thing is people think they have enough time, but they don't. No matter which round they apply. I just wish they would start early and earlier. And
It would be nice. Yeah. One thing I like to advise applicants is that no matter where they're starting, if you're starting, now in May, or if you're starting in June for round one, kind of work backwards to how much time you might need. Like if the test is still pressing, what do you need to do? If you haven't talked to your recommenders in 2 years, you got to start working on that relationship. There's lots of things you need to think about. And if you're not going to make it, well, then you push to round two. That's just often what happens to you. Although, as you guys know, there's some schools that have really late deadlines, and this is really exciting. So we have MIT always has their deadline at the end of September, when all their schools have it at the start of September. So sometimes maybe you can't make the first week of September deadlines because you're kind of rushing last things, but maybe you can make September 29th. NYU Stern always they have an extra deadline in October. So they have round one in September, and then they have an October deadline. So maybe you couldn't make September, but there's October. And there's other schools that have it the first week of October or the second week of October.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can play with that as well. But I'm sure like the deadline date is definitely not one of the major factors why they would select to apply at a specific school. It's much more about fit. But yeah, it's nice to know you can have that.
But it's something, I think if you're thinking about top schools, at least there's several in the top 15 that, you can kind of, push it over,
Sure.
Or sometimes if you are if you're ready for round one, but timing is tight, let's say you only have 2 months, but you're ready to go, you might not want to apply to Harvard or Stanford in round one, because those applications take so much effort. They take so much self-reflection, so much time, that it might be that you only apply to that school in round one. So maybe you might have to put them to round two, and then round one, maybe you can apply to a few more, few schools where you can leverage the applications off of each other. For example, if you apply to Columbia SA1 has a lot in common with Wharton SA1, which has a lot in common with Booth SA1, which has a lot in common with LBS SA1. So maybe you can move faster if you figure out which schools I'm going to do in round one, where I can kind of save time one to the other.
And speaking of the strategy,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
We keep going over each other. I was just going to say, people definitely underestimate how long things take, whether it's the GMAT, whether it's that reflection period before you get into those essays, with the application itself, or waiting for a recommender to get back to you. I mean, all of these things just add up. And as you're working full-time, probably you have other life responsibilities. It really takes longer than you think. So the earlier you can start, the better. For sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, speaking of strategy, how best can someone use the presence of both round one and round two to their advantage? To how many schools do they apply?
Yeah, how many schools you apply depends a lot on you, right? Who you are. If you're 24, and you're working an amazing job where you're going to learn so much in the next couple of years, maybe you're only going to apply to the elites, because you're like, well, if I make it into Harvard or Stanford, I'll go. If not, I'll continue working for you. So that might determine who you're going to apply to. If, on the other hand, if you're 29, maybe it's this year or never. So you kind of have to think about, like, do I need to have a broader school strategy or a smaller school strategy? But let's say you're smack in the middle. You're 25, 26, 27. You got 4 or 5 years of experience. It's time. You're ready to do it. You would want to kind of leverage a way that you could do the most in round one and the most in round two. You know what I mean? And that's what I said about, like, knowing what the essay questions are. So for example, if I was going for round one, there's 2 months to deadline. I don't think I would advise someone, why don't you apply to Duke, Stanford, and INSEAD? Because they're all such massively different applications. They're all so complex. You just kind of have to start from scratch each time. But if you do, like I was suggesting before, let's do Wharton, Booth, and LBS because there is a lot of crossover. You know, it's not cut and paste by any means, but all three, well, Wharton, Chicago Booth, Columbia, LBS, their first essay is, what are your goals? Short term, midterm, long term. Why do you need an MBA? So that research that you do for the first application, you don't have to do for the second because you've already researched what your goals are, you know? So it can make it go a lot faster in that sense.
Yeah, a lot of the groundwork is shared. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yep, definitely. Groundwork is shared for sure.
Definitely not a copy and paste job, especially when you're putting the wrong name of the school and the wrong essay. You know,
definitely not. But the ideas, you know, the concept, the research, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for example, if someone has a very difficult, if their goal is very complex, right? I was thinking about a client I had a couple of years ago that wanted to be in neurotech, and in order to write his essay, he had to do a lot of research, and he was looking at clubs, he was looking at companies, he was looking at why, what he wanted to do, the impact. And that took quite a bit of time for him to get all the research on what exactly he wanted to do, why he wanted to do it, how he was going to do it, what was the business opportunity out there, what was the social impact. But he only had to do that research once. You know, when he wrote the first essay, the research already done for the next essay. You know, so that he didn't have to repeat.
Mm-hmm. So working with your clients over the years, what are some common mistakes you've seen people applying for the first round?
Common what?
What are some of the common mistakes you've seen? What are some, things to avoid, pitfalls?
Oh my gosh, waiting too long, as we've been discussing. Sure. That is a big one. Not doing enough school research, not knowing what's the difference between, if you're applying to Tuck or you're applying to MIT, the culture is different. You need to know that so you can strategize in a different way. Rushing it, I think, choosing bad recommenders, I think, is a big mistake. I see a lot of people do as well.
Yeah. Going back to the research part, maybe we could dig into that a little bit deeper. What makes for good research for the schools in terms of applying? What do you think?
Well, I think the first place to start is obviously with the schools themselves, with the website. That's literally the easiest place to go. Check out the website. Look how long is the program, what kind of class methodology is happening, is it case method, if it's more get a sense of the program from the website itself. But that's not enough. You do have to go deeper. One good way to do deeper research is to know what your goals are. So if your goals are healthcare or your goals are, technology or digital, go to the school and start digging in there. Look at some of the clubs, look at some of the classes, what professors are doing research in the area that you might be interested in. Sometimes you can go to places like LinkedIn and do a cross-reference. You find, okay, graduates from this school who work in neurotech or who work in, impact investing or climate finance. And then you can kind of like reach out to them. So I think it's like you start really broad and then you kind of start getting closer and closer. Of course, attend webinars, attend seminars, in person and online. So most of the schools have a question somewhere in the application that says, how did you get to know us? What did you do? And you just don't want to leave that blank. It's like, so you want to be able to check, like, I did this, I did that, I did this.
The student ambassadors is a great way. Like you said, using LinkedIn to find alumni and a few examples, not just taking the opinion of one person and let that be your reality, your perception of that school, but a few different voices, right? That will give you more holistic view. If you maybe think about it, you talked about in-person versus online. And I do realize in doing your research that visiting campus in person, while that is a great way to really know the culture and the vibe, like, you feel good there. It is a luxury in terms of time and money to get there. So the question I still get a lot, though, is do you think schools give any kind of preference, or does that have a lot of weight if the applicant has actually taken the time to visit?
I can't answer what schools think. In my experience, when I've interacted with schools, they recognize it's a luxury. If you live in, Los Angeles and you're applying to Stanford, it's really not that hard to make the visit. Or maybe you live in Dubai and you're applying to Stanford, you have to be wealthy and have all the free time, and then you can visit. But what about the people that don't have the money or the time? Are they going to be penalized because they don't have the money or time? I don't think that's the case. And this is, when I've talked to admissions about it, they've often said they love it. Yeah, come visit us. We love having you here. But you're never going to, I don't think you'll get bonus points just because you have the money and time to do so. However, I've heard from some of my colleagues, there are some schools that really kind of do, like it a lot. I don't know that personally, so I've just heard that.
It could be a cherry on the cake, perhaps, but it's not going to penalize any message.
Yeah, and also I think it depends on how you interact with the school. So you can just go and walk around and attend the seminars, but imagine if you were in some special field like climate finance or PE. And imagine if you went and talked to the PE club and say, hey, you guys want to, I'm already working in PE, maybe I can talk to you guys about what my job is. Imagine if you're an applicant and you go and actually contribute to the culture of the school. Like, that's amazing. Now I think that would make a difference. I actually know it would make a difference.
For sure.
Yeah, and I was thinking about research that you mentioned. A lot of them do research on the surface. For example, they might think, oh, the class size of Harvard is such and such, and so on, but they don't like kind of reflect on what it could mean to their experience. And I think that's where the whole, essay writing part comes in terms of, how they're able to convert all this research and the amount of input they got from everywhere into something that can make sense about themselves in the essays.
Yeah. Well, I think this gets back to something that Eric said, like, what mistake do they make? I think that not answering the question is a mistake. So, for example, there are schools that want to know, why do you want to come here? And Columbia is very clear. Tell us, why do you want to come to Columbia? Wharton, Booth, there's a lot of schools that are like, why here and not somewhere else? There's other schools that aren't super interested in it. Harvard would be a case. MIT is the case. They do not ask why this school, because they want to know why you. And their essays are very clear about it. Tell us about yourself. It's not tell us about yourself and why Harvard. So one thing I'll see often I'll get an essay, like people are doing sanity checks and they'll send me something and they'll spend, 300 of their words in the Harvard essay reciting all the things they're going to do at Harvard. And I'm like, that they didn't ask you that. That's not the question. They know why you want to come to Harvard. That's clear. What they need to know is who you are. So I think that it's great to do the research and to understand the culture and know how you fit in, but also know what you need to say and what you don't need to say.
First rule of essay responses is answer the question.
Question. So important. I think another mistake when people are starting to do essays is when it says, why the school? And they say things like, well, I want to attend your school because it's one of the best schools in the world with such a diverse teaching staff and all the wonderful clubs and the great, outcomes. And I'm like, which school are you describing? This literally could be all of them. So if you're going to say why this school, be specific about why this school.
Yeah, that's like a chat GPT answer.
Exactly.
And talking about your favorite topic, Candy, I know like you love essays. So how should someone look at creating the MBA story?
Oh, well, I don't. Well, are we talking about round one again?
Yeah, round one.
Well, I think getting I think when you're thinking about round one, is what we're talking about. We're going to apply for round one. In order to apply for round one, you need to know your stories. You need to have your essays, right? You need to be able to present your narrative. Some people call it a brand. I think you guys had a really nice talk about branding a couple of weeks ago with Hillary, right? So I think if you're going to apply to round one, you have to have certain stories down. One thing I push my clients very hard is the goals. I'm like, you have got to know what your goals are. Even for schools that don't ask about the goals, like Harvard and MIT and Stanford, they don't specifically say, where are you working short term? If you move to interview, they'll ask it, but it's not necessarily in the essay. You still need to know. You need to understand your goals very deeply. So I usually think that that's something you need to start preparing. As far as the personal stories, there's so many schools with so many different types of essays. So we have Stanford saying what matters most, or Harvard saying who are you, or INSEAD saying describe yourself, what are your personal traits and your weaknesses and your strengths. So there'll be some sort of generic you're going to have some sort of essay like that. So I think one other thing is start writing it out. Who are you? What makes you you? What makes you tick? What do you care about? What are the experiences that have marked your life? What does matter most to you? What keeps you up at night? So you might want to look at some sort of like a list of story questions. You can start pulling out stories, thinking about things, and come up with sort of your core stories. And, are you a risk taker? Are you generous? Are you empathetic? Do you want to make a difference in the world? If so, in what way? You want to make a difference through finance? You want to make a difference through healthcare, through politics? So you kind of have to do a lot of self-reflection, I think, even before you get to the essay writing, so that then you can start constructing the essays based on all that self-reflection.
Something I want to just take a moment to mention, as we are all members of AIGAC, the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, and thanks to this great organization, I know both of you and so many other people. I'm going to actually pop the little logo up there. And just next week on May 24th is the AIGAC MBA Applicant Fair. So this is a virtual event, and actually you should pop the website on there. I'm going to do that right now. So anyone who's interested in registering, it's not too late. There are going to be loads of top schools there, like pretty much all the top 20 schools in the States, plus a bunch of great schools from Europe, like INSEAD, HEC, LBS, and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to that. If anyone's interested, it is definitely not too late. I'm just going to pop that into the comments for you. And there you go. So that's coming up next Tuesday, May 24th. Virtual MBA fair. Don't miss that.
That's a great place for applicants to start learning about schools and to ask these questions. Should I apply in round one? What GMAT score do I need? These sort of things, like you want to start getting information. So,
yeah, and the one thing.
Go ahead, Krithika, please.
One thing I love about the applicant fair is it comes in early, so that you could do all the research that you want and get all your ducks lined in a row much earlier, and you don't have to wait for the schools to officially release all your material on the website and everything in June and July, which can be a little late for some people, who are typically looking to start early.
Yeah.
The timing is key. The quality of the schools that are going to be there are fantastic. I mean, there's MBA fairs done by a lot of fair companies all over the world. They're great as well, but you really will find at this particular event, it's really all the best schools. And it is a great opportunity not only to speak to schools and ask them questions, but also there's going to be multiple panels on various key topics that can really help guide you on this part of your journey. And whether you're looking to apply for 2024 or 25, 26, either way, it's a great time.
Yeah, you'll always get some great information from that. So, yeah. So round one, what else do you want to know?
Yeah, it's coming back to round one and gearing up for that. Krithika, do you have a couple more questions?
Yeah, I think like I had the one about, the test. Most people think about if they get rejected in round one, can they go for a later round? And should they improve the GMAT or switch to a GRE? Kind of a question, right? So when you get stuck because of a test score, what do you do?
Well, if you okay. Do you mean if you get rejected from round one, or okay? If you get, so when you apply, I think that's a misconception that I have heard often. When you apply for an MBA, you're applying for a class. So you're applying for a class the class of 2026, the class of 2027. You can apply in round one, round two, round three, round four, whatever round they have, but you can only apply once. So if you're rejected in round one, you can't apply to that school again for that class. You can apply for the next class, right? So you can't just retake something and reapply because they don't allow it. It's just not allowed. Now, there are some schools, Europe in particular, which will do things like, okay, hey, we really like you round one. You look really great. Can you get that GMAT up and we'll consider you in round two? Well, that's a whole different situation. You haven't been rejected, but you are being warned that you need to get that test score up. So that happens as well. But yeah, if you apply and you get rejected, you can't apply in the same year. You can reapply. And yeah, hopefully you need to reevaluate your application and think, can I apply with a higher score this time? Maybe some better leadership, more refinement on my goals, that sort of thing.
There's two cases that I wanted to see if you wanted to address. So for the schools, for example, INSEAD that has their fall and January intakes, if they've been rejected from September, can they apply for January? Even though it's the same year.
Oh, you mean for the, well, yes. So if it's a European school, you have different interns. So like, for example, INSEAD, they have 4 intakes to start in January, 4 intakes to start in September. If you apply for the September intake and you're rejected, let's imagine you apply for September intake. I can't remember when's the last deadline, like May or something like that. And then round one is for the next intakes, just like 2 weeks later. You can totally do that because it's different intakes. How different is your profile going to be from one to the next? I don't know. It's not a lot of time, but you absolutely can do that for sure.
Absolutely. And the other situation that you made me think of when you were speaking about, you know, if you think you can get your GMAT up another 20 points and may want to wait till round 2, if you do submit for round 1 with X score GMAT and then retake the GMAT, can you improve your chances of getting more scholarship or, more scholarship?
I mean, well, if you apply in round 1 with, you mean to the same school. So imagine I apply in round 1 to whatever school, and then I get accepted, and can I go back with a higher GMAT and get better something?
Scholarship.
I think that would be a case-by-case basis. There are some schools that allow you to send a new test score after you applied. Not a lot. And I would say in the M7, not a whole lot at all. But I've definitely heard of that case. I guess it could affect scholarships. I've never thought about that before. Like if you apply and get accepted and then you're in that scholarship phase, because there is a phase where you're getting offers. I wonder if you go back and say, hey, here's a higher score. It's a good question for the AIGAC applicant fair or the conference.
The conference coming up in June. Yeah, we have the All Schools Day with most of the same schools from the applicant fair. Will also be at the, I'm really looking forward to that. First time in person since 2017?
2020.
It's all before my time anyway.
Yeah, if people don't know what that means, it's like at the AIGAC conference, it's not applicants, it's consultants, AIGAC, MBA admissions consultants with schools. So we're kind of like getting information that we can then share with our applicants. And I think that would be a good one. Like, if the scholarship money is coming out and you only get this much, what if you present a higher GMAT? I would like to know that. I don't know.
And I like that extra hope that you're offering.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So here's I think this is going to be the last one. I'm going to go around the room with this one. So what do you think is going to be one piece of advice from each of you for those applying to round 1?
I'll let Eric start first because I've been talking a lot.
Last piece of advice, we're going to round 1. Again, if we're talking about North America, which has that more fixed time frame, September, January, March, between 1, 2, and 3, where for the most part, we're seeing pretty much equal chances getting into round 1 and 2, as you really well defined, Candy. So not seeing that much of a difference there, but just starting as early as possible. Like you mentioned, like coming out of university, that's a great time to take the GMAT if you're gonna, especially going for a North American school. Mm-hmm. If you're in Europe though, like the average age of people in European MBAs is a little bit older. They're around 30. So knowing that your GMAT is expires after 5 years, just after university, would be a little bit too early. So it can be difficult to know that if you're not really sure. So I guess starting early, but also just paying attention to timing. And as we could say in French, retro planning, like retro planning means starting with your endpoint and working your way backwards. And that is how you project manage to understand the timing of when you want certain things to start. So you know when they'll be ready so that things arrive at the right time. Very similar process when I was applying for the French nationality. How long certain documents take, and then getting them translated, and then so everything arrives at the same time before they expire one by one. So it is a project management situation, and timing is key.
Right. I think my answer is similar. I would say if you're going to apply for round 1, and like for example, right now we're 3 months out for round 1, make a very clear strategic plan. So have deadlines down when your resume is going to be updated, when you're going to talk to your recommenders. Make a plan for them, because if you're applying to 5 schools, your recommenders have to do 5 letters. And most recommenders tend to be, a little bit older. They have little kids. They might be taking care of parents, and they're busy. So make a plan for them as well. Let them know, like, okay, here are the questions for this school. Here are the questions for that. Here's the deadline. Here's how you do it. Do it for them and also do it for yourself. So you have a very clear plan, like, okay, I'm going to apply to this school first, this school second, this school third, and know where you're going to be able to reuse that sort of research so you can move quickly. But I think having a really strategic plan is important here.
And also you said the word deadline, and I think that is one of the, it sounds like horrible, like deadlines could be scary, but actually there's such a gift, because when you give yourself deadlines and you adhere to them, you make things happen. You know, when it's too far into the future, it's just like, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow. And if you could break that big task of applying to and getting into an MBA into smaller pieces that are more digestible and manageable, and really thinking about setting up a timeline for yourself with deadlines that you stick to, I think you'll be much more successful.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Krithika, what would you say?
I would like, second and third everybody in this, because that's brilliant advice. I would just say that I know that many people start the tests late and I think that, oh, it's just a bunch of essays and I just have to fill the form. How hard can a short answer be? And things like that. So I would say that just how important your GMAT is, so is the rest of the application, or in fact, more important. And one thing is, please get recommenders who support you, and not the otherwise, because otherwise round one might not happen. Which has happened for a few of them before. So yeah, great advice. I think that's all the time we have for this episode. I want to thank my co-host Eric Lucrezia, and of course the guests in the audience and anyone who joined us on stage, and especially our featured guest Candy La Balle from La Balle Admissions. Candy, the insights you shared today, should get many MBA aspirants started in the right direction for class of 2026. And if you like today's episode, please give us a little thumbs up. We're always open to your suggestions and questions and comments, of course. Be sure to subscribe to MBA Waves to stay on top of all the latest trends and news in the world of MBAs, business, and education. Finally, don't forget to check us out next week, same time and place. And for full access of upcoming episodes, please visit mbawaves.com. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.